I think that if you have an open mind, if you're okay with challenges and realizing that those challenges are going to get you to that next step in life, closer to your goal, I think as long as you're open to that, you'll have a successful time regardless of where you go and regardless of what age you are and what experience you're trying to do.
A single moment of curiosity can lead to unexpected opportunities, some ending in a lifelong involvement with Japan. Our conversation partners all have a unique Japan journey to tell, one that's steeped in connections that have enriched their lives and altered them in deep, meaningful ways. Join us in their Japan journey and be inspired to embrace what's unfamiliar. Your next single moment of curiosity could lead you to possibilities you've never dreamed of. This is My Japan Journey. I'm Yuko Handa from the Japan Society of Boston. Kasia, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is extremely exciting.
Kasia Lynch is the founder of Ikigai Connections. So Kasia, tell us, where did your Japan journey start, but also let us know a little bit about Ikigai Connection.
Thank you for asking. I never really had an interest in Japan until middle school when some students from the high school came and said, you have to try this new language. And to me, I was just like, what is that? Let's try it. So I did. And then my junior year, somebody had to go to Japan for a semester and nobody wanted to go. So my teacher and my dad got together and they made me go. And it was in the middle of Shigaken, in the middle of countryside. I had to take 2 bicycles to get to school, plus a train in the middle. And it was just like, where am I? So it was a very shocking experience for a 17-year-old girl. But after 4 months, I came back to Michigan and realized, that was a life-changing experience. And my life will just has to be centered around Japan. So I decided to study it in Boston University. And after that, during that, I went to Kyoto for 1 year, my junior year, on the KCJS program. And it was in Kyoto. So as you can imagine, Kyoto is just beautiful. So I fell in love even more with Japan and I decided I have to come back. So I went back to BU, graduated, and decided to apply for the MEXT scholarship, the Monbu Kagakusho. And I was thankfully accepted and was sent to a school that I didn't really know much about. It's a women's university in Tokyo. And I was like, Tokyo, no, it's a big city. I can't go there. I want to go back to Kyoto. But I loved it. I actually ended up staying in Tokyo for 6 years. And it is probably my favorite city in the world, mostly because I'm an A-gata. I like things that are on time, like trains. I like, orderly fashion, people walking on the right side of the street, like that kind of stuff was just made my life so much easier. I made a lot of friends. And to this day, I still use Japanese and my Japanese business culture knowledge in everything I do. After Tokyo, I actually I lived in Poland and Italy, and then back home in Michigan working at Japanese companies. And since 2018, I started my own company, which is Ikigai Connections. And here I share my experience and my advice to anybody else who wants to use Japanese language and culture in their job. So I connect with the younger me all the time, and I keep giving them ideas, things that they can do. So many people want to go to Japan and work there or live there, study there, but a lot of people also may not want to actually live there. They just want to use their language skills. So I focus on that for people who want to do that. And although I have a job board that's focused on Japanese jobs in the United States, I also have a lot of resources for people who want to find their Japanese job in any country, India, England, or Canada, Poland. So I connect with those people as well too. And it's been a lovely ride up till now. So I just look forward to see what happens next.
So Kasia, take us back to that moment in high school. When you were in middle school, somebody from high school says, hey, you should check out this language, right? Was there anything else besides the, wow, that's an interesting language that kind of attracted you to, or was it just pure, in certain ways, serendipity?
It was a little bit of serendipity, but I knew that my high school offered Spanish, French, and German. So I decided French would be kind of nice because I also speak Polish. My family is from Poland. So I was born and raised in America, but I speak Polish with a very strong American accent. But I always liked languages and trying to figure out how the languages work. So I knew I wanted to do some kind of language, but the top one going into high school was French. But then they said Japanese. I was like, ooh, they have characters. What are these characters? They have 3 alphabets. What's going on here? So I think the challenge is what made me want to just check it out and see. And the rest is history.
Very interesting, isn't it? Because
Mhm.
it wasn't, in certain ways, it wasn't intentional. I mean, it
Correct.
really was just kind of pure chance.
And I never had Japanese food before then. I never knew about anime or manga. It wasn't very big at the time. I never knew anything about Japan. I didn't even know anything about Asia. And I had only known a little bit about Europe because of my trips to Poland to visit distant family members there. But I never really knew much about the world and that there are other cultures, there's other religions, there's other ways of doing things. So it was kind of serendipitous.
So there's Kasha, high schooler Kasha in
Mm.
Michigan,
Mhm.
right? Taking or having been exposed to this language called Japanese.
Mhm.
But then your father and your teacher kind of collaborate and sends you to Shiga, of all places. Tell us, what was it like from that moment you landed in Narita? Was this your first time?
Ah,
Assuming this was your first time in Asia.
yes. And it was my first time on an airplane by myself. And, this is before internet and phones, cell phones. So you're just kind of get to the airport and you think that someone's going to come pick you up. You don't know what they look like. You don't know what their names are. You can't even speak the language. I remember leaving and my sensei told me, you should probably start writing in a journal. And I said, oh, I'm not going to write in a journal. What does that do? Like, that's strange. But I actually remember opening up a notebook, a simple notebook on the airplane thinking, this is really weird, but here I go to Japan. And that journal ended up being a lifesaver for my entire trip because it was not easy. It was a huge culture shock. What am I eating? I can't understand what people are telling me. And why do I have to wear this really long skirt and ride my bike in it? And why don't they turn the heat on in the school until November 1st? I'm cold. But at the end of the day, it was wonderful people. My host family was just wonderful. They taught me Japanese words one at a time. They were there for me. They talked to me even though we didn't understand each other, but there was some kind of communication. My teachers were amazing. They gave me experiences that I've never um, thought I had to have when I was in Japan. And just the students that I met, I'm still friends with them to this day. And actually, 2 of them are entrepreneurs. So we have a connection there. There were 2 foreigners in that school at the time. One was a gentleman from Costa Rica, and it was me with long blonde hair. So I definitely stuck out, and people would just look at me, and I would never know what they're saying. And I'd be walking in the streets, and again, this is in the middle of nowhere. So little children across the street would point and scream at me, and I didn't know if they were scared or what. So it was very shocking, but I remember, calling my parents on Sunday nights and saying, this is so hard. Please let me go home. I want to go home sooner. I don't know what I'm doing here. But over time, after a few months, it became something that I realized it made me stronger. I just learned about the world, if that makes any sense. As a 17-year-old kid, you're just like, what's out there? And here it was just this kind of a very harsh but wonderful way to experience what's out there. And I think ever since then, I haven't been the same. I came back home to Michigan, to my, smallish suburban town. And I don't know if I could relate with people talking about just what we have going on in Michigan, which was my life before I left for Japan. But then I was just like, wow, there's so much more. There's other American states, there's other countries, there's other cultures. Like, I just have to know more. And that's started this unsatiable desire to learn about other things.
Now, how long were you there in high school?
That was 4 months.
Just 4 months.
Yeah.
Just 4 months that kind of opened you up and changed
Yes.
you.
It was a very long 4 months at the time.
But again, I hear you, but I have to also say there are plenty of high school kids who go to Japan or maybe other places in the world and
Yes.
say, I hated it. I don't want to do anything to do with it. I'm very happily home, and that was just bad. I hear you say it opened you up, but there must have been something in Kasha to start with. You must have had a little tiny seed of, loving adventure, Kasha.
Yeah, and I think it's because of my parents, and I haven't actually talked about this much. This is my first time saying this out loud, but my parents escaped from communism And they came to America with very little language, money, possessions, and they started from scratch. And they've worked so hard. They always instilled in us, the three daughters, that, you can work hard to go towards your dreams. And also it's important to have dreams. And also the whole like international thing of, I think they've really helped me with that, because I wasn't just your typical American student. I had this, Polish identity as well that I was scared to kind of show. And then when I went to Japan, I think it kind of gave me permission to embrace being different. And even after all my years of living overseas, because total it was 8 in Japan, 2 in Poland, 1 in Italy, and then back home to Michigan. But all that time, I've just been just realizing that I'm never actually just an American in America. I have my Polish and Japanese connections. And then in Poland, I'm Polish, but like wherever I walked, people could tell I was not Polish fully. And then in Japan, I was obviously stick out. So I think that all kind of converged to make me really appreciate multicultural identities and just that global idea. So I think that's where it kind of came from.
Take us back to your college days. You come back from Japan. Kasha's already a little bit changed.
Yes.
And then you go to college. I mean, Michigan to Massachusetts, BU, that in itself also must have been a little bit of a change, no?
Absolutely. Because I was very introverted and shy, quiet in high school. And in college, I was able to embrace a new kind of like, hey, nobody knows me here. Nobody's from Michigan in this area. And I can just start afresh at age 18. I can become the person that I really want to be. So I was experimenting with lots of things. And my little good girl personality, I kind of left that in Michigan, and I pierced my nose the first like weekend I was in Boston just because I wanted to. And I took the T to, I think it was Almont, and I've never taken public transportation in my life. And here's this 18-year-old doing this to go to find a tattoo shop that would give nose piercings. Like that was crazy in itself. And then I just kind of like chopped my hair and I used like heavy dark makeup and I just looked a little different, but I was experimenting. I wanted to see what I liked. BU, they still pride themselves on representing all the countries of the world. So I met people from so many different countries and I learned about different religions and I went to different food tasting events, and I met friends who were like that too. So they introduced me to their culture. It was almost like traveling internationally in Boston. And I think I was given permission to just kind of explore. And that's what I really appreciate about living in Boston. And then my junior year, I was able to apply for that year abroad in Kyoto. And that just further made me realize how important it is to keep learning and to keep seeing what's out there. And I really wanted to share all that with my friends and just say, hey, this is what ozoni is. And people weren't sure what that was at first. Or I learned how to make zenzai from my Kyoto host family. And that's, you boil these red beans and you add a bunch of sugar. And my friends were like, what are you doing? But I just was called to really share these international experiences. I think it was great to have that kind of freedom to do that in Boston.
But Kasha, I'm a little bit curious. So BU, you could have still, for instance, taken more interest in Poland, or you could have gone and taken Greek, or you could have, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but you could have become more interested in dance. But something kept you with Japan. What was that? Was it shocked me enough when I was in high school trying to figure out?
There's two things. And one of them is I think it's kanji. I have kind of a pictographic memory and I love puzzles. So for me to look at kanji, it was very much a puzzle to figure out what the heck these characters mean. And the more strokes, the better. I needed to figure out what made up the top left side and the bottom right side. I tried to learn Hangul, the Korean written alphabet, and I couldn't because there weren't enough characters. It was just a couple of straight lines and circles. And I was like, this is not difficult enough. I, for some reason, was really driven to learn kanji and to just take these tests to make sure that I passed them. So I really liked practicing. And the second thing I think was the people. I have had the most amazing experiences in Japan. I've had people who opened up their homes to me. They've really taken me under their wing. Maybe they appreciated the fact that I appreciated them so much. So it just kind of built this mutual appreciation. And I would learn one word, arigato, and they'd be like, pachi, 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 pachi. And then I would learn arigatou gozaimasu. Oh my gosh, then they would just be celebrating that. And then arigatou gozaimashita. So every time I learned a new phrase, these crazy people were celebrating me. And I just felt like a superhero. Even walking the streets of, the countryside of Kyoto or Shiga, as well as I was living partly in Kobe and some in Saitama, which were not in the cities. And these people would just come up to me. They'd want to talk with me. So I felt like a hero. And I think that's what might have created that kind of love for Japan. And it never ended. Like even in Tokyo, I would go to the Starbucks on the way to work every day. It was right next door. And on my last day, I was like, oh, osewa ni narimashita. And they gave me free coffee. They signed the cup for me. Even leaving the airport was just, I was amazed at this customer service, and people were always wonderful. It was just these amazing people from the first day to the end. And I think it's just this connection I have. So I've always appreciated that.
And I think there is a little bit of the, customer service or omotenashi feeling. I don't know if it's unique to Japan, but it's definitely present in Japan, right?
Oh, yeah.
When I fly home, I fly on a Japanese airline. And the reason why I do that is because the moment I get in, I do feel like I'm taken care of. The omotenashi is there, right? Maybe it derives a little bit from tea ceremony of Ichigo Ichie, right? Like you meet someone and it might be 2 hours, it might be even 30 minutes that you know this person, but you treat them like they are your lifelong friend. I think that is a little bit of what I think I'm hearing a little from you. On top of, I'm sure you were just a really interesting person for people to connect with. But I think there is a little bit of that, just that omotenashi feeling. The people do care, right, about the other so much, which can be a fantastic thing. And it also can be a tough thing for some Japanese, right? Because it's always the other first, always the other first. As an American person, you can see both, right? The beauty of that and also the limitations of that for an individual. Kasia-san, take us back to when you were in Tokyo. You said you first went to Shiga, and then you spent a year in Kyoto, and then your Monbuka scholarship sent you to Tokyo, and you go, no! But then you end up actually liking Tokyo. Kyoto's a big city, but nothing compared to Tokyo. Tokyo, even at that point, I'm sure was a lot more international than, say, Shiga, for instance. What was your I know you ended up liking it, but like your gut first reaction when you first started living in Tokyo?
Well, the first time I actually visited Tokyo was on a weekend trip with my friend from Osaka, and I was living in Kyoto at the time. And I remember going to Shibuya and standing in that intersection, the one that's in all the movies and TV, the famous pictures, and being like, what is this? And just like climbing, like panicking that there's all these people. And my friend from Osaka, who's used to big cities, she was also freaking out. So that weekend, I was just like, oh, I don't know about this city. So then I was sent there. I first started in Saitama, which is it was an hour north on the Saikyo-sen. What happened is that we were sent to Saitama University for a 6-month language program. So we were still kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was like a long 45-minute walk from the main Saikyo line train station. So it's kind of out there. And we started experimenting with the bigger cities like Omiya and maybe Ikebukuro. And I think it was a slow and gradual interest in the big city of Tokyo, because after the 6 months in Saitama, they sent me to the girls' dorm in just outside of Ikebukuro. So Ikebukuro is in the very northwest corner of Tokyo. So that's when it started getting a little crazy. And I moved into my little tiny room and set up, and I went to school, and I had to take 2 main train stations to get to the school. And I was just like, wow, this is pretty intense. On top of it, one of my friends from Serbia, she rode her bike to school. So she said, you should get your bike and we can ride together. So riding a bike through the cities of Tokyo is not something I recommend for everybody, because you have to be courageous. And also, I didn't wear a helmet at the time. So now I'm like, I should have had better insurance. But now, I learned so much about like just getting places, getting all around Tokyo. And I really learned to appreciate it, especially the public transportation. And so during school, I mainly biked. Tokyo is so big, but like was also so easy to get anywhere. So I appreciated meeting my friends in Shibuya or even Tokyo Eki and just having, experiencing new restaurants and new cafes. So that was always fun for me. So like my friends and I would just go to these random places and we would explore Tokyo through food, through karaoke, especially. That's a whole other topic that I absolutely love. And I just realized how much Tokyo has to offer. If you go to the bigger parts like the Shibuya and the Shinjuku, you'll see that there's lights on all the time and it was very loud. People were respectful. In the apartment that I lived in, people were always respectful of the noise and there's so much about Tokyo that I absolutely loved. Like everybody knows how to take their garbage out properly, and I learned how to recycle. Everything seems to run so nicely, on time, and oh, I love it. Love it.
I think you did mention that you love order, right? And there's
Yes.
definitely order. People follow them to some extent. So I think I do see even in the Scramble Kosaten and Shibuya,
Yes.
right? There's a certain rule that people follow, almost unspoken rule, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to admit, the only people who don't play that are the visitors, which of course they're not going to know because they don't live there. So then in the end, Shibuya no Scramble Kosasen does get a little bit chaotic because there's people who follow the orders and then there's the visitors who don't know the order.
Yes.
So I think I can see how kind of interesting that can be.
Yes, and I wanted to become a Tokyo Jean so badly. I wanted to like be a Tokyoite, right? And I remember even like, taking the morning rush hour to work or whatever, I'd be going and I'd be like, the escalators, you have to walk on one side and now you can't walk, you shouldn't be walking at all, but you stand on one side and you walk on the other. And I remember like running into other people being like, oh, they must be from Osaka. They don't know how to stand properly in the escalator in Tokyo. And I just felt like I was a Tokyo person. And it was a wild trip in a sense, because I obviously don't look like I'm from Tokyo, but everything about the city, the lifestyle, the appreciation for others, I think the respect, like you said, this unspoken like rule, people would just follow it, except if you weren't from there. So it was really interesting.
And I also love that you highlight even within Japan. I mean, there's commonality throughout Japan, and then there's real strong distinctions, right? Like Osaka and
Yes.
Tokyo, Kyoto and
Yes.
Osaka, Kyoto and Tokyo. I mean,
Yes.
it's very different, and I'm sure Shiga is very
Yes.
different too. It's interesting you mentioned. Yes, I think the roles have changed, but I think the side that they used to walk on was different in Osaka versus Tokyo. So I remember getting in trouble in the Kansai area because I'm from
Yes.
Tokyo and I'm standing on the wrong side, right? Little things like that, I think, are things that you find out when you live there versus when you travel there. So,
Absolutely.
Kasha-san, can you think of other things that you've noticed living there versus just traveling there?
I deal mostly with business right now with my company. So even thinking about like business interactions in the office, there's so much more that you can get out of actually living and working in Japan versus just a business trip that you take to Japan. And you have like a week working with your Japanese counterparts. So that was one thing that was really big to me. I found that a relationship takes time to build. Trust takes time to get there. And the longer you know somebody, the easier it is to gain that trust. And sometimes you need that icebreaker. So in Japan, the company I worked at, in the beginning, I felt very much out of place. There was only about 60 people. I was the only non-Japanese person there. I remember didn't really know what to do, who to be with, except for the two people that were at my little island of desks. And then the first company outing, we went to some restaurant in Izakaya. We had some food, and everybody's doing kanpai with their little shots of beer, and then the party started, and then you start making friends. And I'm not saying you have to get drunk to make friends. It's just that whole atmosphere of being together and sharing food together, and then going to your nijikai or your sanjikai or your next, your second party or third party, and usually it includes karaoke. So that's where the relationships were formed. And I realized that's like the first time I talked with my buchio, my manager, and I was like, oh my goodness, this person who I thought was just so far away to talk, I would never talk to him. I was so afraid of him. I got closer at karaoke and at these dinners. And then I would come back to the office on Monday, and it was as if it never happened. You didn't talk about it, but now you knew that that person liked this particular song or liked to talk about this at these izakaya. And so the next time it happened again, it just like brought you even closer. So you have to have these experiences. You have to realize there's a particular way you act at work and a particular way you act outside of work. And I think that that's something that I would never have picked up on if I didn't live in Japan long enough. It's just so important for business relationships. So then when I was working overseas outside of Japan, working with Japanese people, I remembered that. And I was always trying to find ways to kind of like break the ice a little bit so that you can get to know somebody, because you're emailing your Japanese counterpart all day, and or you're having some Zoom calls or terebi kaigi, and you don't really know that person. It's just hard to do business if you're not really like connected. But once you make that connection, then you both realize, oh, the other person is also human. We're both just trying to do our jobs. Let's see how we can work together to collaborate. And it just makes things so much smoother. So that's why I talk about karaoke in a joking sense, but it really is a great way to break the ice, bring you closer. And then after every one of those kinds of like icebreakers, I find that relationships always improved.
It's very interesting you mentioned that because even writing emails, right, are a little different. And to your point, for instance, when I'm writing emails to somebody from Japan, or from somebody from Japan is writing emails to me, there's always a very long maioki or introduction.
Yes.
Oh, cherry blossoms are very beautiful today in Tokyo. I was just walking through Shinjuku-gyo, and I wonder what the flowers are like in Boston.
Right.
Versus when you are writing an email with your American colleagues or your counterparts, it's really to the point, right?
Right.
I'm writing this because I want you to submit this report.
Right.
In certain ways, American way is a lot more efficient. It's a lot faster. It's a lot more to the point. But even on emails in Japan, you're supposed to create this connection or this relationship. And when you come to sort of abrupt, as in give me this in an email, it actually is probably detrimental to the relationship. So it's very interesting you picked that up.
I found that when I came back home to Michigan after my time in Japan, I realized that I think the reverse culture shock was worse because I wasn't expecting myself to think in that same Japanese way. So then I would be getting the emails, hey, comma, let's do this, or join me here. I'm like, what? How can you just like be so abrupt like that? So I felt that oppositeness. And now I try to balance both of them together because I realize the American way of like, like this example of writing email is so much different than the Japanese way. And I kind of go in the middle and I try to adjust it depending on who I'm connecting with. But yeah, so it can be very different, and it can really mess with your mind if you're kind of in the middle trying to figure out who you are in this whole relationship.
But isn't it wonderful when you actually get to that point where you can see both? And then when you
Yes.
can switch from one to the other,
Yes,
doesn't that totally open up your world?
absolutely. And I think a lot of my friends who when we had the same experiences in Tokyo, you come back home and then you start bowing when you're on the phone, right? And you start covering, like I went to a women's university, so I'd cover my mouth all the time when I was chewing and or giggling. I just have to cover my mouth. And it was just all these things. I came back acting different. And although I would say that my first reaction to that was, oh no, who the heck am I? Why am I doing this? I'm so weird. Now I look back, I'm like, you know what? You're right. This is really interesting how I can be both depending on like what language I'm talking to. So my voice will sound different when I'm speaking in Japanese. My mannerisms are different when I speak in Japanese. And I am really thankful that I can do that. But sometimes in the beginning, I was like, what is happening?
I think it's very healthy. And I went through that too. It's very healthy to go through that sort of identity crisis, right? Who am I?
Yes.
Until you get to a point where you say, that's all me. That's
Yep.
all me. And once you are able to embrace that, then it's like, wow, endless
Absolutely.
opportunity.
Absolutely.
Kasha, I always ask at the end of our interviews, what would you say to people who's actually just starting their Japan journey, or people in Japan who's just starting their US journey? Are there certain must do's or must sees?
I think that if you have an open mind, if you're okay with challenges and realizing that those challenges are going to get you to that next step in life, closer to your goal, I think as long as you're open to that, you'll have a successful time regardless of where you go and regardless of what age you are and what experience you're trying to do. Unfortunately, I've met some people who, like you mentioned at the beginning of this call, they tried an overseas experience, whether it was just a short trip or longer, and they came out hating it. And I completely understand that there's so many factors to go into why a person would like or not like a situation. That's fine. But if you haven't even an inkling of learning what it's like to be overseas, keep in mind it's going to be tough as heck, but that just makes you stronger. And I think it makes you more interesting, and it makes you realize just how much the world has to offer. So let's say you had a terrible experience in one country. Maybe it's a different culture that would speak to you better. Maybe it's a different part of that country that you want to go to, because, like even in Japan, Tokyo is wildly different from my first experience of Shiga. Like, think outside the box. Try new things. Go have fun. Whether you're coming to the United States from Japan or going to Japan from the United States or any other country, it doesn't matter. Just have fun and just try new things, because if you don't try new things and if you just stay in your bubble, it's kind of lonely. You don't get to meet new people that might take you to a different, restaurant, or try a different food, or meet another person that could change your life in a way. And so just go crazy, have fun safely, but don't be afraid, and just realize it's going to be tough.
Last but not least, if you can redo this whole thing, would you still find yourself in Shiga?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I wouldn't change a single thing.
And do you think you would still travel on the T to Alston, not Alston?
Yes.
And get your nose pierced?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would do everything all over again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kasia. This was a beautiful, beautiful Japan journey story.
I really appreciated this opportunity. And like I mentioned before, I'm such a fan of your podcast. I think this is exactly what the world needs. So like you mentioned in the description, it doesn't have to be just about Japan, but just this is a great way for us to experience other people's journeys. And so thank you for putting it together, and I look forward to hearing more of them.
Support for My Japan Journey comes from the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership and the Toshiba International Foundation. To learn more about the Japan Society of Boston and our guest speakers, or to find the transcript of each episode, please visit our website at www.japansocietyBoston.org/podcast. My Japan Journey is produced by the Japan Society of Boston and edited by Lucy Jones. Our theme music is These Times by Blue Dot Sessions, and additional music is composed and performed by Pianimo.